Welcome to Rise from the Ashes. Our podcast looks at various issues for families. We'll be talking with attorneys about personal and legal concerns having to do with divorce, custody, and parenting time. There are also a few topics about letting go, moving on, and new beginnings. Please keep in mind this podcast is only to inform and help to understand legal and personal issues as they relate to family law. It should not be considered as a replacement for a qualified family law attorney. When in doubt, please contact a professional. Rise from the Ashes, focusing on matters of the family because family matters. Hi, and welcome to our podcast, Rise from the Ashes. I'm David Braddock. I'll be your host for the podcast. And we're talking today with Susan Mundahl, an attorney at Mundahl Law. How are you doing, Susan?
I'm great, David.
Now, today's topic is what we're going to be calling Dividing Property 101. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about this. What exactly is involved in dividing property in a divorce?
Well, David, it's as simple as 1, 2, 3.
What are those 1, 2, 3?
Well, the first question you have to ask is, what is the marital property? The second question is, what is the value of that property? And the third question is, who gets it? And what we do is we put it into a spreadsheet and answering those three questions. And then we can look at what is a decent property division, or to use Minnesota statutes, what is fair and equitable.
You know what we should do? We should probably go into these three questions separately.
I think that's a great idea.
So let's go back to the first one. What is it? What does that mean exactly?
What we're talking about there is, according to Minnesota statute 518.58, all property obtained during a marriage is considered to be marital. And so you have a statutory presumption that everything is marital. So if you want to raise a non-marital claim, like, say, an inheritance, a gift from a third party, or money that you obtained prior to a marriage, it's your burden to show that that money came from a non-marital source.
Because of the statutory presumption by the court that everything is marital, then you're saying that you have to specify, hey, wait a minute, this was before we were married, so that should be non-marital.
Correct, okay. But you have to prove it. So let's say you had a house prior to your being married, and that house at the time of your marriage was worth $200,000, and you owed $100,000 on it.
Okay.
So now the house, it could either be that you sold that house and you bought another house, and you put that $100,000 into the new house.
Okay.
And so we have these formulas that we use to determine what the non-marital interest continues to be. Because let's say that house is now worth $300,000. So we knew that at the time of the marriage, half the value of that home was non-marital. Now, if that house is worth $300,000, we know that half the $300,000 still retains its non-marital value. And now the second house is marital, but how much of the value was put into this second house from the proceeds of the first house? Okay. And there's a specific formula we use, but that's just a for instance. And if people have questions about it, that's why they go see attorneys.
All right. Well, that answers really well our first question of what is marital property. What's the second question, Susan?
The second question is, what is the value of that property? And so again, we're developing an asset balance sheet that includes all the assets and liabilities. So when we're talking about what is the value, let's say the home is worth $300,000, but what's owed on it is $200,000. So the net value of that property is $100,000. And that's what we want to do for each of the pieces of property that we have listed as an asset.
On the asset balance sheet.
That's correct.
Okay, so anything that comes across as an asset, just determine what its value is based on what it may be currently worth against what may be owed on it.
The big one is the home. Because what is the value of a home? What you're looking at is what is the fair market value? And fair market value is pretty subjective.
Okay.
But what the courts look at is whether there's been an appraisal done on the home.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a good place to start is with an appraisal, and then they do comparatives and things like that as well.
Well, that's included in the appraisal.
Oh, sure.
Is the comparatives. But some folks want to save money, and so what they can actually agree on is they can use a market analysis done by a realtor Just understand that if their case went to court, the court's going to look at what does a professional appraiser say that it's worth. Another way parties can save money is they can agree on a specific appraiser. Then that appraiser goes and looks at the homestead, and they come up with a number. And that's the number we use for the gross value of it. And then we subtract, like I said, the mortgage that's owed on it. And that gives us our net value. And then there's some other things involved in it. In essence, that's at least the investigation we do to try and determine what the value of something is. Another one in looking at value is debt. It's really kind of interesting because this goes again to this marital, non-marital idea.
Right.
For instance, I had a case where I was representing wife and husband had a credit card that he charged all of his golf expenses on. And he would take trips to golfing places and he would buy golf clubs and all of that. Well, that is actually presumed to be non-marital because there was no benefit for the entire family.
Even though it was during the marriage, it's entirely for his benefit.
That's right. And I had another case where wife went and had a credit card that she put all of her plastic surgery on, and I represented husband, and his husband said he didn't get any benefit of it.
Okay.
and so we just told her we were going to consider it non-marital. In the end, if the parties had gone to trial, a judge would be making those determinations, but most cases settle, so
Right.
we use that as our rule of thumb.
Okay. And now, as I recall from the other podcasts that we did, marital, non-marital, there's tangible property and then there's intangible property. So you have to value that stuff as well. What are we talking about?
That's sort of lawyerese talk. I prefer a little simpler explanation, which is tangible, obviously, is the stuff. Cars, boats, houses, that stuff. And then the intangible is the financial stuff. So you're talking about retirement accounts, savings accounts, checking accounts, anything to do with the financial stuff. They're looked at the same. The only distinction we make on the financial stuff is it pre-tax or post-tax? Obviously, the stuff you buy, that's all post-tax. Whereas some of the financial stuff, specifically 401ks and IRAs, if they're not Roth IRAs, those are all pre-tax. And so you don't want to be adding stuff up on the bottom of the balance sheet because they don't equal the same thing. Because something that's pre-tax is worth less.
Okay.
Because whoever receives it is going to be paying taxes on it eventually. That actually leads us to our third question, David.
Okay, so we've answered our second one. What's the value of whatever the property is?
Yes.
And what is that third question?
The third question is who gets it?
Okay, who gets it?
Right.
How does that work? I've heard you talk about this before. There's formulas. For example, if there's a Mercedes-Benz and then there's the old jalopy, you can't say you get that car and I get this car.
Try.
Yeah. So there's ways of,
Sure.
You can explain that.
Well, and it's really funny, too. If you want to use the example of, say, someone has a brand new Tesla, they may have just bought it. And so actually the net value of that Tesla might even be zero.
Because of what's owed on the mortgage. Right.
What's owed on the
loan, the car loan.
Yeah. Exactly. Whereas the jalopy has been paid for, and let's say the jalopy happens to be a 2010 Toyota Camry.
Which isn't such a bad jalopy.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It might have a value still of $7,000.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
And so that's the importance of using that spreadsheet and in getting those values, figuring out what the value is. We're either going to put it on husband's side of the balance sheet or wife's side of the balance sheet. And if it's a same-sex couple, obviously spouse A and spouse B.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it can be that simple. Or the third one is they sell it. The important thing to remember when we're doing these, though, is it's not good to just compare each one and say, okay, I'm going to pay you $50,000 on the house, and then you're going to pay me $10,000 on the car, and then I'm going to pay you this on the retirement account. That's kind of silly. Mm-hmm. It's easier to just add it all up at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
And then do the division based on that, although you will be dividing the pre-tax with the post-tax. And so what we do in that case is we usually, if it's a pre-tax 401k, if we want to have it go against what someone might be receiving from the home, sometimes we'll just discount what the tax value is.
once you get to that bottom line and you've subtracted each and you see where they're coming, so you're on a scale, that's where some of that back and forth, I don't know if trading's a good word,
Sure.
or bartering, or
That's a good word.
or whatever. Okay.
Yep.
So now you were starting to refer to something more specifically than that.
Well, the whole point is property settlements in Minnesota have to be fair and equitable. Now, fair and equitable, there's no such thing, I think, as fair, because most people will say fair is they get what they want. Whereas it needs to be more, okay, I can live with this. But when you're dividing it, if you're putting everything in financial terms,
Yep.
Dollars and cents,
Yep.
the easiest way to divide a buck is 50-50, right?
Yep.
So when we're looking at these spreadsheets, we're kind of looking at what is an equalizer so that the dollar amounts are fairly equal.
Well, it seems to me, with this kind of a balancing act, a good idea to have an attorney that knows how to manage being able to balance both sides like that.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone thinks they can do this stuff, but it really is more complicated than that. Even though what I say is it's simple, it is just 3 questions. But people's finances are not that simple necessarily. And the more assets parties have, and the more diverse their assets are. So there's a mixture of the financial, or what you call intangible, versus the tangible assets.
Yep.
It really does help you to be guided by someone that knows what they're doing. And at the end of the day, you want to have a property division that you each can live with. And it needs to include some liquid assets mixed in with stuff that maybe they're not going to get for a while. And what I mean by that is, am I going to get some cash, or am I just going to get a house? Because you have to then wait for the house to be sold. And so there have been some people who have been what I call house rich and cash poor. One of the things of a good attorney, signs of a good attorney, is that they will go and try and get that division so that each party has a little of each.
Well, that pretty well covers our third question of who gets it. And so all 3 questions, ABC 1, 2, 3. What is it? What's its value? Who gets it? Those are the things that are generally looked at in property division. Anything else you'd care to add, Susan?
Just that at the end of the day, just look at, can I live with this? Is it fairly equal? Once you answer those questions, settle your cases and then move forward.
No trials.
No trials.
Yeah, if you can avoid it. Those are costly.
Those are costly. And it's an interesting thing, too, because you actually should be thinking about those when you're talking about your property settlements. You need to think about, if I give my spouse, say, $5,000 more, but I avoid a trial of $10,000, now that makes it a little more equitable.
There you go.
It's just something to think about, David. And I wish everyone good luck. These divorces, they don't have to be that complicated if you're willing to just figure out what it is you can live with.
And to have a good attorney that can point those things out to you.
I like that, David.
Those differences.
What a great idea.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Have a great day.
You are listening to Rise from the Ashes, the podcast channel that takes a careful look at all things having to do with legal procedure within the family law process. Rise from the Ashes is sponsored by Mundall Law, who specializes in assisting families and individuals through the legal process with respect, dignity, and caring. Mundall Law is dedicated to helping people to solve their legal problems. You can visit the Mundall Law website at mundalllaw.com or call to schedule a consultation with one of their qualified family law attorneys. Rise from the Ashes, focusing on matters of the family, because family matters.